some damage in the recent storm, and she is fine. She's okay, but her house has seen better days. So she's working on that, and we will keep working. First, if there's any citizen comment on agenda items tonight? Negative. Okay. Okay. Then staff report. Patrick.
Yep, great. Thank you, George. First of all, I'd like to announce that our new chief building official started today. So we're happy to have a chief building official on board. It's been almost a year, I think. I'm going to butcher his last name. Michael Ariano. Is that right? Ariano. Came from a suburb of Dallas and started today. So we'll get him at a future meeting so you can all meet him. But a lot of great experience, and we're excited to have him on board. So, and then secondly, I'd ask Scott to give a quick staff report on our RFP process for our bike ped master plan. We discussed this during the budget process. We're looking to do an update. We only budgeted $25,000. We did a process, and they all came in much higher, and so we'd like to give you an update on that.
You bet. We went through an RFP process to update the bike ped master plan, and we got 4 proposals in. All were from well-qualified firms. As Patrick mentioned, they all came in significantly above the $25,000 we had in the CIP. I think initially last year, when we were going through the budget process and took a first crack at this, we were talking about $50,000, and that got whittled down. But with the 4 we got, 3 were over $50,000, and 1 was just under around $45,000. Staff did an evaluation of the proposals and an interview, and the consultant we'd like to recommend to award to, Tool Design Group, in our minds had the best proposal. They came in around $59,000, give or take a few dollars. But in looking at the proposals and talking about the costs a little more, we compared to the plan that was done back in the day, 2009, 2010. We're looking at a much better, I would say, more robust public involvement program on this one. Back then, our public process really didn't go quite to the level we do now with a lot of our projects. And one of the things we liked about Tool Design Group too was some of the innovative or additional ways in reaching out to people they suggested. For example, when you work on something like this, there's groups of people that are going to turn out for sure. The people that want to see more bike ped things, those kinds of things. But most communities, in Tool's experience, there's a large element of the population that really does need good walking facilities to access transit or to shops, businesses, and so forth. And a lot of times they don't show up at public meetings or respond. So I think a lot of it's going to be reaching out, a lot more effort reaching out to a more diverse audience too, so that we get a nice big perspective. Because when we ultimately go out and deliver projects, try to construct them, it's nice to have had that involvement up front, because we've had those experiences where in the planning process you can draw all the pretty lines on paper and everybody thinks that's great and let's do it, but then when you actually go out and want to deliver, construct it, there might be people turning out that didn't get involved in the first place. So that's part of the reason that we expected the higher amount. There's just a few more things going on now that weren't back then. We're dealing much more with ADA compliance now. We also have a separate proposal out for that, but for our transition plan, but our bike ped master plan has to work in close concert with that. We're looking at identifying gaps a lot more in the city-wide system as a whole. The plan back in 2009 looked a little bit harder, more at the major corridors like 32nd, 44th, and so forth. This one we want to really look at the city more comprehensively. Gold Line Station, there's just a lot that's coming up around that. We're going to be focusing some more efforts there. I could probably go on and on about some other things, but that's where we are. And We've looked at the CIP, other items there. There's a couple other items in the CIP we have identified where we don't think we're going to be spending the money we originally had allocated there, and we think that we can make this up. So just wanted to give council an update report on where we are with that. If there's any questions you have.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Could you tell us some of the ways that they want to reach out to the different groups in the city? Is it meetings, or what's in their proposal as far as how to reach out?
Yeah, kind of a combination of everything. I think back in the day, a while ago, it used to just be the public meetings here at City Hall, and we'd send out the notices by hard mail. I think with the social media and a lot of the other options that are available now, we're looking at reaching out more rather than trying to get people in here. Identify who the different stakeholder groups are, reach out to those. It may be people that, like I said, use transit, but and they have to walk to it, but they're not going to think about coming to City Hall for a public meeting. Kind of going out there, maybe to the businesses, special events, of course. Like Carnation Festival, the Criterium, things like that. One of the things they have in their proposal too is a interactive map where people can just go in online and identify where the problem spots are, where the gaps are, and we can get that kind of input. But again, it's a lot of more reaching out rather than trying to get people to come to us.
Other questions or discussion? Yep, and I don't see
So
one.
at the end of this, how comprehensive and how long is this plan good for? And otherwise, if we spend this money right now, is this a 5-year plan? Is it a 10-year plan? Is it a document that we can refer to for how many years? And
Yeah, one of the items in their work scope is to put together anywhere from a 5 to a 10-year capital improvement program. So we want to identify, not just infrastructure projects, but are there other things we need to be doing? Are there policy measures? Are there ordinances? Public education, other things we need to be doing too. But looking out at least 10 years.
So, Patrick, are you looking for direction this evening? Or?
Yeah, or just if there's any concerns or questions. Otherwise, the contract approval would have to come back to council anyway. It's over $35,000. But like Scott said, we're not asking for additional funds. We'll find those within the budget, but it is larger than we did budget for it.
Zach, go ahead.
In reference to the 10-year period you're looking for this to stand for, what is the existing August 2010 master plan? How is that not being sort of sufficient for this current 10-year period, or why is it being redone at this point?
Yeah, I think one of the weaknesses in the previous plan was it identified needs in certain corridors, but didn't really do a good job of prioritizing them or putting them in a long-term plan that we could really identify and leverage with other projects, because we know a lot of what we want to do probably parallels street improvements, drainage, those kinds of things too. So that's one of the things that we hope to get out of this is that the plan will identify some of these opportunities a little better than the previous one did, and prioritize things as well.
Do you know what the cost was for that previous plan, or how that compares to what we're paying for this?
Boy, I don't know what that was.
Yeah, if I remember, I believe it was close to 50 also. And to add on to what Scott just said too, I think some of that was done before I even came on board. The final plan wasn't adopted until 2010 or 11, but it was a 3-phased approach, and a lot of the work was done several years before that even. So it's actually a much older report than when it was actually adopted. But the initial phases were.
Yeah, and I want to say it was almost part of a bigger process with the Vision Wheat Ridge, and there were other initiatives citywide other than bike ped things that were being discussed as part of that process too.
And relative to the ADA transition plan, my understanding is a significant portion of that, or the resources involved, is relative to the field work that goes into the identifying the intersections and whatnot. Is there any sort of plan relative to coming up with other resources, volunteers or otherwise, to help with that, and also looking at whether or not these two elements could be combined in a single contract to sort of kill two birds with one stone.
Yeah, the ADA transition plan, we have a separate RFP out for that. In fact, we did just get proposals in last week. I believe we got 3, maybe 4 proposals in. They're all different firms than who proposed on the bike ped plan, but a lot of the extra effort you're talking about, like with the inventory and stuff, will be included on that contract. But they will coordinate closely, the two.
We don't have any existing inventory information relative to what we're looking at to.
Yeah, we do. Actually, we had an intern student part-time, 2 of them actually, did a lot of that work for us last summer, so we have a really good jump on that, a really good start, but part of the consultant's work will be kind of just doing a double check on that, second set of eyes, maybe picking up where we might have missed as well.
But, so that's doing work in addition to what was done, they're not going to redo that work, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, second?
Yep.
Okay, I noticed right when we were transitioning, we had someone come in and sign up for public comment and just missed it. We haven't got to our one main agenda item, so I'll ask council if you're willing to let a citizen come up and comment.
Yes.
Okay. Before you start, citizen, I want we last time we talked about having official time on this, and so I think the clerk will go up and start the time, and you have the lights there, so you know how that runs.
Okay, thank you for indulging me. I'm sorry I was late. I first want to thank council for taking up what I think is probably, Kim Calomino, 4070 Dover Street. Again, thank you for your indulgence, and thank you for taking up what I think is probably the most important issue that our community faces, which is long-term fiscal sustainability. And thanks staff for an incredibly detailed and, in my opinion, somewhat frightening report as we look at what lies ahead or untended from the past and ahead from a maintenance perspective, if we're able to accomplish the things that we need to do and haven't done, and how we maintain them going forward. I would first encourage you to think about how you communicate these needs to the citizens. If we could possibly encourage you each or together in your districts to hold neighborhood district meetings to inform citizens about this important information about how our city, our community desperately needs investment, and investment by us, the citizens. It is incumbent upon myself, my neighbors, my community, your constituents, to recognize the value of the many assets that we control, that you control, and what it takes to maintain and sustain them, and what we lose if we don't do that, and what the risks are to us. So I would encourage you to talk among yourselves and look at a very rapid pace of holding district meetings to share this information and talk about how you might move before the citizens, either ballot questions. I know you're also talking about potentially utilities, a stormwater utility, but whatever the answers are, the discussion must be held quickly, and I would encourage you to place something on the ballot for us to move forward. I would encourage sales tax increase. We have many things to tend to, and I encourage you to help us do so. Thank you.
Rachel?
Good evening. My name is Rachel Haltine, and I live at 4690 Balsam Street. And I'm just going to really echo Kim's words. I've lived in Wheat Ridge for about 4 years, and it's a community that I have never been more excited about thinking the future. And as I've gotten more involved with the community and become more familiar with the budget year to year and the kind of issues that we're grappling with, it's not that difficult to see that we have some fairly significant infrastructure, drainage needs that we just don't have the resources to address. So when I think about this as a community that I want to grow old in, I'm not that old yet, but I see myself here for decades. And the only way to see myself in this community for decades is to think about what we need to invest in today to make sure that 5, 10, 20 years from now, it's the kind of community where I still feel this kind of passion for. For us to do that, we need to be willing to take bold leadership and step up and really advance the kind of things that we need to make sure we can take care of our streets, that we can take care of the kind of drainage and flooding issues that are negatively impacting our community, that we can address safety, and that we can maintain the level of service that we have through our Parks and Recreation Department that I think so many of us feel is a hallmark of a city. So I just really want to expand on Kim's comments that the best way to find out what those things are is for you counselors as best you can on short order to hold district meetings and ask the questions so that you can hear from your constituents who are thinking about themselves in this community 5, 10, 20 years from now. And so that can be a dialogue where we get to hear from our neighbors what else they're concerned about as well. So I really appreciate that you're looking at this, and I see that this is the first of 3 meetings addressing this very issue. So to me, that signals it's significant and it's important. As a bike ped advocate, it's frustrating to feel like there's no money for us to even talk about for advancing biking and cycling. We need the roads to work for everybody. We need money to make that happen. So thank you guys.
Okay, anyone else? Last chance? Okay, thank you for that comment, and we will go to that item on our agenda.
Great.
Item number 2.
Thanks, George. Well, as Ms. Holtine mentioned, she kind of set this up for me, but we have scheduled potentially at least 3 meetings to have an iterative discussion process about this topic. It's, we're calling this long-term fiscal sustainability. That means a lot of different things. And so tonight we kind of want to start that off. We actually started this off on the 21st of March, and we got some direction from council and some questions, and we're trying to bring some of those answers back to you tonight and in the future meetings. But we really want to kind of start out with a very high level discussion tonight and not really solve all of our problems tonight. And unless you guys want to do that, that would be awesome. But we're not intending to do that this evening, or not expecting that. But want to make sure we educate you, give you all the information that you need to make good decisions. And at some point, if you do, as Ms. Calomino said, if you want to take something to the ballot in November, I think I mentioned it in a former memo, we actually have to have the ballot language to the Jefferson County by the 1st of September. We usually adopt that by an ordinance here in the city, so that takes a first reading and a public hearing. So you'd probably have to know at the latest by the 1st of August what that language is and to start that ordinance process. But I think if you want to start educating your public and talking to your public, you're probably going to want to know sometime by 1st of June, I think, if you decide to do anything that's going to require a city vote. So starting tonight, we have several different items that we're going to discuss, and I kind of listed them 1 through 4 in the memo. We're not necessarily going to go in that order, if that's okay with you. I think it makes better sense maybe to start kind of with the DIRT Task Force recommendations that we've all been talking about over the last several weeks. And actually, while Heather gives a brief summary, especially for the new council members who may not know as much about the DIRT Task Force, she's going to just give a brief summary of what that was, how it was formed, what the purpose was. While she's doing that, I'm going to hand out a larger spreadsheet. The spreadsheet was in your packet. It was the DIRT Task Force list. But this spreadsheet that I'm going to hand out is bigger. You can read it. But it also has more detailed project descriptions of what each of these projects are. The spreadsheet that was in your packet just had a name, and some of them were kind of hard if you didn't know what they were. So we weren't able to pull these descriptions up until today. So I'll pass these out while Heather's given a description.
Thanks, Patrick. The DIRT Task Force was formed by former Mayor DiTullio in early 2007, and DIRT stands for Drainage Infrastructure, Roads, and Trails. The task force was composed of 18 members, which included the city treasurer at the time, Mary Cavara, a couple council members. It was chaired by Councilmember Mike Stites, included Councilmember Larry Schultz prior to serving as treasurer, Councilmember Terry Womble, Councilmember Dean Goki, and then several community members, including a youth community member from Wheat Ridge High School. So this task force evaluated over several weeks about $143 million worth of projects, which were categorized into, I think it was about 26 projects in total. And so in your packet, attachment 2 depicts the top 4 rated projects totaling $37 million, and then the top 10 projects totaling $75 million. So the task force held several meetings, as I noted, over the course of several months, and they took public input at all of those meetings. They heard presentations from staff members. The projects were categorized into what you see on this handout: parks, trails, recreation, roadway and streetscape, power line undergrounding, storm sewer drainage improvements, facility improvements, information technology, also land banking. And then there was a 5-point scale that was used, and each task force member, after they heard a presentation on each category, again, parks and trails was one evening, they would rank those projects. And that was done on a 5-benefit category approach. So things such as creating a sustainable city government, city prepared for growth and opportunities, all tied to the strategic plan at that point in time. And then based on, again, a 5-point scale, given minimal benefits to overall universal benefits as the whole city. So that's a brief overview of DIRT for you.
Great, thanks, Heather. Any questions on that before we move forward? Was there a question? Yeah, sorry, Larry.
Yeah, I know we've completed some of these already.
Yeah.
And
Yep, I'll get to that. That's, yeah, thank you. Yep. And so the spreadsheet I handed out tonight, the items that have a little yellow highlights over the number are the ones that have completely or partially been completed. And we can kind of go through some of these individually if you'd like. We haven't updated any cost estimates yet. The other spreadsheet that was in your packet, this one that doesn't have the full description of what these projects are, lists the top 10. And back in 2007, 2008, we did come up with estimates for those top 10 projects. Scott's staff is still working, well, all staff actually is still working on making sure those estimates are still current, but we'll have that information for one of the next meetings. Maybe I'll just go through what we've completed already. Number 3 on the item on the listing is the Clear Creek Trail connections. This isn't necessarily completely done. There could be other connections, but we did make some major improvements recently at Kipling and 41st there with that new trailhead. Item 6 is a land bank project. That's 44th and Wadsworth. The Urban Renewal Authority did purchase that property back in 2007, 2008, and that's what's currently, you see the senior town center apartments are on that property today, so that project is done. Item 7 is a drainage storm sewer project. That's the 26th to 29th Sheridan to Fenton, and that was done here just recently. Again, I think we mentioned this earlier, that as part of the Ashland Reservoir redo, they donated a pipe in the street for us, so we're able to expand that project and get it done. Item 8 is parks, trails, and recreation, park infrastructure upgrades, and Joyce said most of these are done. These are just doing some ADA accessibility, new bathrooms, replacing playgrounds. That was the majority of it. We got a lot of grants to replace playgrounds over the last several years. There's always going to be some annual upgrades to our parks, but this list, most of those were completed. Item 9 was completed, or not completed. Item 9 is partially completed. This is the Wadsworth reconstruction from actually 35th to I-70 now. And we did get the $25 million grant from DRCOG. We're going through the environmental assessment this year. So that project's complete or partially completed. Item 11 is emergency warning system. This is mainly for floods throughout our areas in the city where there's creeks, and we did get some grant funding to put up emergency warning sirens throughout the city. So that has been completed. I can ask the chief today if this was really done, and he said yes. Item 14, at least a portion of this is done. This is dispatch consoles for our 911 dispatch center. If we consolidate as we're moving forward and regionalize with the other cities, we're not going to have to replace that equipment. We'll still need mobile and portable radios, and we have them currently, but they'll need replaced at some point. Our last replacement was covered with a grant. Item 15 is the CAD and records management system. Both of those we're regionalizing, so item 15 is being taken care of. And then on the back, item 20, it's another land banking project. That's 38th and Depew, and that was private property, but it was on the list as a potential property to purchase, but it was developed with the Perrins Row townhomes. So that is taken care of too. I think we caught most of them. Of what? Some bonus points? Sure. Wadsworth. This is 32nd Wadsworth to Kipling. Well, yeah. I mean, there was some work done recently, an asphalt repave. This project that was on the list at this point was an actual total reconstruction to a street standard, so it would have sidewalks and curb and gutter. So what was done was not what this project was. I think that's on the estimate that made number 10. So it was estimated back in 2007 at about a $10 million project to do that. Do we kind of just want to have a more general discussion on this? And actually, I think one more thing before we get going. I think in your packet on the smaller spreadsheet that doesn't have the actual descriptions of all these projects, staff did add a few more items. Is that still in here, Scott, or did we not include that? Oh, it is. It's on the last page of attachment 2. Additions we've added in 2016 that may rise to priority 2, and those are Clear Creek Crossing, the infrastructure improvements that's needed for that development, the Gold Line Station infrastructure area. There's some cost there. As we mentioned tonight, the ADA transition plan. Once we get a plan done, there's going to be a cost to implement that. Bicycle and pedestrian improvements, citywide drainage. Well, that's on the list, I guess. Just our annual preventative maintenance, traffic signal upgrades, various street improvement projects, bridge maintenance and rehabilitation, technology upgrades, and trail replacement for Clear Creek Trail. So those are just some things that really aren't on the Dirt Task Force list specifically, but those are just some other areas that may be in need of funding in the future.
So just from a discussion standpoint, I mean, I think this Dirt Task Force project descriptions and list is a good one, and it sounds like we've added more. And I just would recommend that, I think this was done in 2007, Heather had said. So it would be nice to go back if there's, a group of folks similar to the makeup of the last task force to kind of go back and rank some of these, and it sounds like there's some that needs to be added. I know, like the undergrounding of power lines. I mean, just when you see Kipling, what a change that makes with something like that. It's amazing. And, are there other areas to target that? And then we've got drainage issues. I know the flood plain changed, so I know there's some suggestions on what we could do to help some of those folks. I'm just wondering if this is a good document to start with, but one that we should meet and update with what we as a group feel how to prioritize them. I think it kind of goes back to some of the other things that we look at, the city plan, the bike master plan, that some of them all need updated.
Just in the sense of updating, number 12, 35th Avenue. I see that this is about stormwater more than anything else, but we should also consider in conjunction with that the bikeway project that Denver is doing, and we should integrate those as if we can at the same time.
Other comments or questions? Monica.
I think we discussed last time kind of updating this list so that we could prioritize what needed to be done. But I was going to ask, over at the Ashland area, there's that little white structure. Are there any plans to save that, to keep it there, maybe move it somewhere else in the city?
Kind of the old, I think it's an old pump house or something, actually,
Yeah.
I know we reached out to them years ago. I think Joey DeMott was actually interested in trying to save that, and they said, I think they were willing to work with if anybody wanted it. I don't know if we've done much since then, if you had an idea about saving it for another use. I think Joey was talking about like an ice cream stand or something. He was going to move it to a private property and make a little, kind of like Little Man ice cream downtown. And but I think they were willing. It's still standing.
It's still there.
Still standing.
Yeah.
There.
So is the city interested in trying to?
If you had a suggestion for for a use, I don't know if there's some historic value to it, or we can look into it if council's interested.
I mean, I'd like to.
Yeah. It's yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe this has been a couple of years already. I think we did reach out to them, and I think they seemed open to letting somebody move it. I think it would almost have to be moved brick by brick. They said maybe potentially, or at least part of it. But it's something we can look into again if somebody's interested. I don't know if Mr. DeMott was still interested or not for private use, but
or is there something we could use it
Yeah.
there on site for?
On site.
Without having to move it,
yeah,
integrate it into the park or
yeah,
something.
yeah. If they, because it's kind of in the interior right now, right? It would probably, if it's going to be used publicly, it would probably, because it's going to be really fenced in.
Yeah.
Unless that is it right there.
Is it still there, Tim?
It is not here. Was it in the center by the tank, or where was it?
So,
I think so.
Yeah.
Kind of on the west side, I think.
Okay, then that might be it. It might be here.
it is.
We'll look into it, see what options there might be.
Okay, great, thanks.
Jen?
On that issue, I just would like to say that might be a good private-public partnership, that if somebody like Joey is interested in using it, and the city's interested in partnering, and if there's a use for it, something like that. My question is for number 2, we're ranking number 2, school site upgrades. I'm a little confused. The school property belongs to Jefferson County Schools. So I was just curious if you could explain that a little bit more.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And it's more of a joint program between, it's not public-private, it's public-public, but just a partnership with our school district to utilize some of the playgrounds in these schools. Yeah, they own the land, but the city has actually put in playgrounds on some of them because we could use them for the neighborhoods too. So I think that's what that was. Joyce is very sick today, so I didn't get to talk to her about this one. But I think it's really taken advantage of leveraging the school properties and using their property, but maybe we provide the playgrounds and picnic tables and such for our neighborhoods around those schools. So it's just a joint parks recreation type project.
This is just a comment looking at it. When I'm thinking of some of the schools, Stevens has a whole new playground, and some of the other ones have had upgrades to their playgrounds in the last several years, since 2007. And it was ranked fairly high back then, and I'm wondering if we have any other information as to why the group might have ranked it that high, and if maybe things have changed enough in the last several years that maybe that's not as high of a priority for us. I do know, we've upgraded a lot of our own park playgrounds, and maybe that priority isn't as it was back then.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think there's been a lot of changes with both the city and the school district on if that really is I don't remember. Heather, do you have to remember? That's been so long at the notes. I think it was also probably a fairly low cost compared to maybe some larger things, and you're just leveraging some partnerships. I think that's probably why it got such a high score, but if I remember right.
So with this document that we're looking at being almost 10 years old, and like to Genevieve's point about the school site upgrades being ranked number 2, and it not necessarily, some of that work has been done, and so it's not necessarily needs a number 2 ranking anymore. I agree with maybe reenacting and putting together a new dirt task force, plus with the 12 things that the staff edition, 2016 editions, those haven't been vetted through the same process, and so I think that it would be who of us to put that together and kind of put together a new list to work off of.
About those 12, I see a couple things on there that are really not under our control. The Clear Creek Crossing and the Gold Line Station area, we probably will respond to a developer in those cases. So we probably have to. Wouldn't we have to respond if depending on what was required when a development came along and those?
Well, I think those are on the list because a lot of these projects take public infrastructure also to be built, and the Clear Creek, as an example, Clear Creek Crossing. One of the reasons it's still not done is there's about 45 to 50 million of infrastructure, which public infrastructure that needs to be built, roadways that the city could contribute to. So I think that's why it made the list. And same thing with any development, really, that there's public. It could include undergrounding the power lines. It could include anything that's considered a public infrastructure need for that project.
But we would have to respond some way if a developer came along, unless we can do a TIF for that. Isn't that right?
Yeah, unless we had the money. And I mean, if we had the money set aside, and I mean, that's the whole purpose of this exercise is what projects do we need some money for? And if we had the money, we could, like right now, even if there wasn't a developer in mind for the Clear Creek Crossing project, we could build some of that infrastructure that's needed. If you want to take that chance, that a developer will come. A lot of it's just example is what City Westminster they have the money in their downtown area that they're creating. They're building the public infrastructure. Of course, they own all the land too at this point. I think they bought it all, but they're building the street network. And then hoping developers come and build the projects around it. So it's a good example.
To that point, I think the Clear Creek Crossing and the Gold Line Station will inevitably have some type of costs associated from the city, and dedicating certain amounts of money for those projects or defining those project areas as being high priorities places it in the mind of developers, the Federal Highway Administration, and others that we are actively seeking improvements in these specific areas because they are quote-unquote high priorities. So I'm thinking about the discussion relative to coming up with a new task force or new ideas or what the previous ranking system was, how that was developed, and whether that's the way that we want to go relative to coming up with a scoring system again. And thinking along those lines, I think we need to be considerate of the funding sources for these various projects that we're looking at, the feasibility of the projects that we're considering, the partners that we're looking at to involve on these different projects, relative to the school specifically, looking at how do we engage the school district in working with us on the school upgrades project if that continues to be a priority. And then looking at whether or not the specific projects relate to our infrastructure and drainage issues specifically, so that we're not coming up with a situation where we're funding park improvements ahead of critical infrastructure. So coming up with a scoring system that considers that, and then also considering what the rate of return is, not necessarily dollar-wise, but against a certain set of values that we prescribe to the project, and making sure that we're, for instance, with the Gold Line and the Clear Creek Crossing, that has a chance to significantly improve our economic position. And so how does that help score that project higher than some other project may or may not? So I think that those types of considerations will help us filter out what is existing on this list and what new projects that are not on this list need to be considered, and how do we fund those? Because if we go to the voters for any type of increase in any form, whether it's a fee or a tax, we need to be, in my mind, explicitly clear on the projects that are being considered and leave it at that, not necessarily present the voters with an opportunity to fund any and all projects that may come down the pike, but be very specific and say that we're asking for an increase to fund these items 1 through 10 because we've defined these through a public process as being a priority. So that'd be my input.
How many weeks did the task force meet?
It got kicked off in January, and the staff report that I have going to council was July 16th. So they met over the course of several months. I think they met every other week, if I remember right, but I'd have to go back and look at the minutes to give you exact dates. I mean, at some points there was quite a bit of time between the meetings in order for individuals to really dive in and figure out what their priorities were.
They were recorded on camera, so we can
They were.
get you the DVDs if you want to
I know,
watch them all.
Zach.
Yeah, it's on Netflix. Binge watch one weekend.
Season 1, Turk 10. Well, to both of those comments, because I appreciate both of those comments, I think maybe we should just think really quickly about that in light of the timelines that Patrick mentioned at the beginning. So if we're shooting to try to get organized and be specific and resolve these lists with public input, I think it might be wise to discuss a little bit how that could happen. And obviously we had public comment tonight that suggested at least one venue was district meetings. That could be an option, certainly one that we can schedule and get through, perhaps with more expedience than assembling a task force. It may not accomplish the same things, but I'd be interested in what people think about that.
Well, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, it's not reinventing the wheel. I mean, this task force probably wouldn't do as much work as the original task force. They're going to review, and they may not need as much time. And so if a group of people could be put together, they'll be reviewing this, looking at the new items, and then prioritizing. So it may not take as long.
I think there are definitely things on this list that we can agree are things that that are still a priority to our city, like the storm, water and drainage issues. And so maybe it's something where we can look at it, if we don't have time to put together a whole brand new working document, but look at it, come up with like some top fives, and also do the work to get a working document to work further on down the road with.
Okay. Any other comments on that? Okay.
George, can I just, and this might be discussed later, but I think as we talk about, we're kind of talking about ballot language kind of as a side question, and I think that's an important thing to talk about, because I know the first time we talked about this, we kind of talked about like a fee, And, of course, yes, a fee could go to a vote and a fee could be a fee. And so I think those are also things to consider. And I know, like Mr. Rand brought up, the management of fees, like what would that look like as a city if we did a fee, versus if we did a mill, it would come in through, property tax. So I think those are also, we're kind of talking about ballot language, but I've kind of heard two conversations. I don't know that we necessarily said the fee would not go to a vote, but we also did mention that it could be assessed without a vote. And then, again, we got the cost of managing it, et cetera, and then we are talking about a ballot question, which would be, at least from a process perspective, the county would be collecting it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's still going to be a part of this conversation. I know it was discussed in pervious services and some of the other things in here, but
Okay, well, I think we can move on to one of the other points in the memo, and we'll I think take note that we have some more conversation to land on the ground about how we're prioritizing and putting out into the public some of these ideas and getting them prioritized as soon as we can.
Sure. Maybe the next one we'll move to is item 3 in your memo, which is it's a review of our asset maintenance program and schedule, and we're still working on this to get a little even more detailed. But there was a specific question, I think it was from Mr. Ann, on what percentage of our budget is maintenance, and we put together took a quick swag at our 2016 budget and pulled out what we consider maintenance expenses, and just keep in mind this isn't. We tried to keep them separate from Heather and I went back and forth on, was this really an operating expense or a maintenance expense? And so this may not be 100% accurate, but we tried to keep it as true maintenance. And the way I defined it to Heather, I said, when you're doing this, look at what expenses are in our budget to maintain and fix and upkeep our assets, and try to keep out operating expenses. And operating expense in my mind is what we what do we say? Our water bills and our utility bills. Those are operating expenses. We have to pay those to operate our buildings and our facilities. But the good maintenance expense example is our annual preventative maintenance of our streets. We overlay, we crack seal, we chip seal our streets, and because streets are a huge asset on our asset list that our auditors categorize as part of our audits. So. And I'll let Heather kind of maybe give a summary of what we came up with.
Sure. So if you flip to attachment 3, the way I broke this down was maintenance by general fund, CIP, open space conservation trust fund, and then the capital equipment replacement fund. And so you see subtotals and overall total maintenance for those special funds, about $5 million. And again, CIP, Patrick mentioned, preventative street maintenance. So you see the 1.9 million there. And then you see other miscellaneous categories. And again, it was a high level exercise trying to capture, what we are spending money on to maintain. We added a section called equipment replacement repair, which gets a little bit more specific to actually replacing equipment. So fleet replacement within the general fund would be a program 303 item that you see on an annual basis. And so for the general fund, it totaled about 1 million there. And capital equipment replacement fund, we're replacing our Cisco firewall this year, which is not an annual capital expenditure, 5 to 10 year lifespans with those. And then, so that's about $230,000. So overall, we have a total of about $6 million, and I think that's about 14% of our total budget.
And Scott could probably speak to this a little bit too, and I think it was in the memo, but there's certain areas of the budget of our services that we're providing where we're lacking in maintenance. We probably should be putting more into street maintenance on an annual basis and stormwater maintenance and maintenance of other things. So is 14% a good number? I don't know. We haven't done much research on that through GFOA or if that's what we should be spending, but we know we're low in different areas. I don't know if, Scott, if you have any input on that, but.
Well, yeah, I mean, you go through attachment 3 here. I think it's the list here. Like as far as public works operations goes, a lot of it is equipment, contract services, and so forth. I'm not sure if it probably doesn't even include labor. So you know, all the effort that goes out to fixing potholes and drainage, you know, all those things are part of maintaining the system. But you know, it's an operating expense too. So you know, where you would count that, I guess, is you know, you could go either way, but again, like Patrick said, I think this is just kind of an overall good snapshot in a general sense. You know, you could scrutinize it and break it down into further detail, but I think it gives a pretty good idea.
I just wanted to say thank you.
You're welcome.
For at least doing all the work to compile this. At least gives me an idea, or all of us, you know, the percentage of our budget that goes to our daily, you know, maintenance in and out. So thank you.
You bet.
Any other questions or comments on this piece?
And maybe the next item we'll go to is Heather again, and it kind of goes to maybe what Ms. Davis was talking about earlier, that, you know, is it a fee, is it a tax, is it, you know, how potentially are we going to look at maybe funding some of these deficits, and Heather did some research on other metro areas, cities, and even outside of Colorado too, and just over the last couple of years, and paid specific attention to infrastructure type funding, and just give you an idea. And it's a pretty interesting list. And Heather's actually talked to some of these cities. I know she talked to Oklahoma City today because they have a pretty unique program down there on funding their infrastructure, and it's very diverse and some large numbers and some smaller numbers. But I'll let Heather give you an update on that.
Well, the common theme to take away from this spreadsheet is everybody's looking at infrastructure. It's a huge priority, and so on the bottom half of the spreadsheet and onto the back side, you can see that there's small towns to large cities, and each community is having a discussion or had a discussion and sought voter approval and support for a tax increase. And so I got a great majority of this information from CML. They put out 2 publications on organizations that successfully, well, actually, they do both successful ballot questions and unsuccessful ballot questions. So they do a compilation for both bonding and then overall tax increases. So the bottom examples really depict and will give you a sense of sales tax versus property tax increase. You kind of the range, 0.3% to 1% or more. I included projects that focus streets, infrastructure, also included some parks and trail communities as well. The top 5 communities that are shown on the spreadsheet are communities that we would describe as successfully implementing tax increases in recent years. Oklahoma City, they sought general obligation bonds back in 2007. Now they pay for those bonds using increases in assessed values. So they did not have a tax increase go along with those GO bonds. However, the interesting part about it is they do an annual citizen survey, they do public meetings, and they are specific. That's one of the other common pieces of feedback that we've received from communities is the gentleman said we tell people what they're gonna get and when they're gonna get it. And so I provided the link to their website. If you go to that website, you'll see that they have each bond item broken down and the specific language there. More recently, Commerce City, one of our neighbors out to the east, they had a successful program, 5 projects, 5 years. They also had a very robust public engagement program where they used the clickers. They're actually the community that we borrowed clickers from for the Create Your 38 program and have purchased the clickers ourselves. So they didn't use a task force, but they used a robust public engagement program to where they went out to different districts within the community and got feedback through use of the clickers based on the list of projects. And certainly not all of the projects made the cut, but they went for the 1 cent sales and use tax increase. City and County of Denver, I think, is a great example of a community that's been successful in seeking voter and approval on bonding and increases. They are always specific. If you go to Denver's website, they have a very interactive web page where you can click on the different projects and they have a description and so forth. The other more recent example is the City of Boulder. They have a program called Community Culture and Safety. And, some of this I think was driven by some damage that was caused through the flooding that occurred. However, their tax increase is a limited tax increase, so it'll sunset after, I want to say it's 3 years. City of North Glen, that's on this list, they've been successful in terms of going to the voters and asking for the sunset on a tax increase to be removed. So we added that one as an example because that's also something to keep in mind in terms of, having the tax increase, but then the ongoing maintenance component in terms of the infrastructure that you add. So that's a high-level overview.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion on that? Yes, Larry.
Thank you. I'd like to take a few minutes to do kind of my general comments. And I want to preface this right now is that there's no criticism at all in this, because I guarantee you I have not had a chance to wrap my eyes around any of this, and this is my first real budget process. So I'm trying to keep kind of these comments just in general to illustrate the way I believe we need to look at funding the city's needs. I did a little research and I found out that as of 2016, people are now paying more in taxes than they are in food, shelter, and clothing. So the three basic necessities of life have gone second stage to taxes. And I think we need to be sensitive to that, because that is one of the reasons why we have so many people becoming anti-tax. They feel like they're overtaxed. One of the things I would like us to, here, let me go to this before I get to the next topic. I did look up one thing that's kind of interesting, and I find as I go back and look at the founding fathers and what was going on several hundred years ago, a few hundred years ago, that things really haven't changed. And I'd like to give you a quote here from Joseph Story, who was a Supreme Court judge from 1811 to 1845. In a general sense, all contributions imposed by the government upon individuals for the service of the state are called taxes, by whatever name they may be known, whether by the name of tribute, tithe, tallage, impost, duty, gabble, custom, subsidy, aid, supply, excise, or other name, and that would include fees. So be sensitive to the thought that perhaps the citizens understand that a fee is a tax, and we need to not make them think that we're trying to slip something by calling it a fee, that it is a tax increase. The main import of what I'd like to bring up today, too, is that all bureaucracies and all governments seem to come back and say we need more money. And they say, well, we have all these needs, so we need to have more money. But I would like to see us try to focus a little bit on saying, okay, here is the money that we have right now, and are we spending the money that we get efficiently, and are we being good stewards of the voters' contributions to our city? And I did a little research, and this is no way going to be scientific because I spent a day on it, but there are so many variations in how people report costs and expenditures in government. I mean, some people include water service as, they call it an enterprise, and so they have enterprise fees. Just trying to figure out where we stood in general right now as a city. We expend approximately $1,365 per capita in the city. And that's what I used our budget number of 42 million plus and 30,900 residents. And so all these numbers vary and they change. So this is for concept. And of the 10 cities, there's going to be some anomalies in this. Castle Rock spends $3,700 per capita, Englewood $2,000, Brighton $1,900. We came in at $1,300, and then Golden $1,200, North Glen $1,200, Lakewood $1,100, Edgewater $1,100, Arvada $779, and there may be some fees out there that didn't get included in that, and Littleton $594. So are we already per capita kind of wringing extra money out of our citizens or not? And I don't know, because we're not a full service city, and some of these numbers are from cities that are full service, and that would be in their expenditure numbers. So there's just a million variations I didn't have a chance to go over. To try and give this a little bit of a general look, and there wasn't a lot of stuff on the internet I could find where stuff was already compiled. So from the Utah Taxpayers Association, they had a website, and city government revenue from taxes and fees per capita. And they listed their best 5 in Utah. And from North Ogden to Riverton, they averaged about $351 per capita. And then they listed their worst 5, and at the top of that was Salt Lake City, and they had $1,200 per capita there. South Salt Lake City, $1,000. And then the rest were down around 800 and changed to 900. So I'm just trying to get a range or get a feel for what's a norm. And I know there's a lot more information on businesses on, if you have so much overhead, if it's in the construction business, if you're running over 7% overhead, you're never going to make it. And I don't know how to come up with that for a city. So to give you some other stuff that I found, and some of this data is a little old, but like Tucson was 817, and that was in 2010, so if you kind of move that up, that's $1,000 per capita. But I would like us to concentrate on letting the people know, to start with, that we are spending our money efficiently, and that we haven't just said, well, we want to do more stuff, so we need more money. Because that, I think, is what upsets the vast majority of the people, is they think we're wasting money to start with, so why should we give you more? And I was going to bring up another point on that, but I won't do it right now, because I'm trying to not make this as a criticism, but I would like to see us approach the public with some basic facts on here's the money that we get in our efficiency rating on how we're utilizing it right now is somehow measurable. And we can't just cut out any more programs or do something. This is why we need more money. We don't need more money because our sales tax rate is 3% and somebody else's is 5%. And that will turn them off faster than anything. Thank you.
Mr. Urban.
Thank you. I think that looking at sort of the objective relative to the specific projects that need to be completed, asking the residents to consider similar to what Commerce City provided, which was a certain number of projects within a certain number of years relative to, and I'm not sure specifically related to the Commerce City endeavor, whether that was a sunsetted provision or not, but I would suggest that we provide a sunset to the revenue, and then at the same time, so we've got the projects, the timeline, the source, and whether or not that source ends or not, but then also consider how do we communicate the share of the project costs that are being covered by other sources in addition to the sales tax or the other fee revenue that may be generated, so that it's understood that the city is looking at other partners, state, federal, county sources, and other groups to try to fund and support these projects, so it's understood that these projects are not done solely on the backs of taxpayers, but there's some other explanation that relative to the kinds of partners we have in these projects, so that we show that our sales tax revenue isn't the only way that we're going to fund these projects, that we're doing it through a blend of sources to reduce the burden on taxpayers. So that may be something to consider in respect to how do you communicate these requests. But I think if you go to the voters and you say we're going to do 5 projects in 5 years and it's going to be on a 0.5% sales tax, and that's going to sunset in 5 years, it makes it a better pill to swallow than to say, we're going to increase your sales tax inevitably, and we're not really sure what we'll spend on, but we'll let you know when we're done. That just doesn't ring true to me. So I think we need to be specific, time limited, and explain that we're looking at other sources, not just our sales tax figures. And that goes back to the argument of the fact that half of the sales tax generated in the city comes from outside sources. So that may be something to consider. And then the other thing I've been thinking a lot about is relative to the online sales that occur, and letting residents know either through a calculator or some other way to show how much of their online activity is really costing the city in lack of sales tax revenue. That if you were to buy that Amazon purchase at a Wheat Ridge establishment, this is the amount of money that might otherwise come to the city. And because you're purchasing online, and not to dissuade people from purchasing online, but to realize the benefit they're receiving by purchasing online, and knowing that that in some cases may be hurting our revenue sources. So just sharing that information with people to let them know that, I think, is helpful in asking for any kind of increase.
Ms. Davis.
I also think in kind of adding on to what Mr. Urban was saying is it's important to educate people on where their taxes are, because it does seem like if I didn't really pay attention to my little coupon, or if I didn't really know what was added here and there, I already feel, like my property tax keeps going up, but it's for different things. So one thing, it might have been for the fire department. The other thing, it might have been the library. The other thing, it could have been the schools. But I think what's really interesting, and especially when you see this, is that, so the city of Wheat Ridge gets 1.8 mills. So I'm just thinking as a citizen, so that's $35 per 250,000 household. That's what I'm paying, 1.8 mills, $35 per 250, to make sure that my streets are paved, or the sewage is taken care of, or the gutters and the sidewalks. And what's amazing with that is the library gets 4.5 mills. So the library gets 3 times what our city gets. And I think when folks hear more of some of that, now again, not saying that the library deserves it, they probably deserve it as well, but I think the point is just how little of that property tax goes towards to the city for my street light on the corner and the police force and those types of things. That it's amazing when you get folks that are here from New York and those kind of things. They can't believe, taxes are so low because they're used to paying them so high. I also do agree, we don't raise a tax just to raise a tax, but I think there are some circumstances where I know personally as a member of our community, if I want my community to improve, and as we have aging infrastructures, it might cost a little bit more. I think at one point, Mr. Matthews kind of used the example of townhomes and HOAs and stuff when you were talking about HOA fees. And it's the same thing. I was a president of a townhome, and as townhomes get older, fees, it is more expensive to replace a roof, or all of a sudden the wood stairs are deteriorating, so it's going to be more of an expense. So I do think, education from all levels, like what we can do as citizens, if it means buying local, staying in our city, doing those types of things, but also educating folks on what their tax dollar goes to on their statements that they pay in their mortgage is important, and all needs to be a part of this entire process.
I agree that we shouldn't put something that is blank check like out there to the citizens. I don't think that that's fair. And I think that having I agree with Zach, having a defined project, the number of years, how much money, and then we do need a better education and marketing plan. And but not everything, but I don't think it all can fall under one type of tax either, right? We can do a sales tax. Maybe we can also look at a property mill tax. While yes, they are both taxes, they come out of different pockets. So, where a sales tax, half of our sales tax comes from somebody else, and then, our property tax then comes from our pockets. And I'd be happy to pay more than $47 a year to the city, which is what I currently pay in property tax just to Wheat Ridge. So I think it's important that we look at all aspects and how can we, it's like a puzzle, how can we put these pieces together that work most efficiently for our community? What I was going to say is I kind of think we're all coming to the consensus that we need to make sure that we're transparent. We explain how we're using the funds that we currently have, where they're going, the extra funds that we need to get things done. We need to explain what they're for, how they're going to be used. I agree with Larry, Zach, everyone here, that we just need to start out on the right foot. And also, I don't think it hurts to get out there, talk with the public, somehow get this information out there other than, social media or website, one-on-one. I think we need to hit on all points to get this information out there. Thanks.
I was just going to note, I agree with Zach, by the way, that we have to specify exactly what we're going to do and what the benefit is. And we probably have to give up some of the things on the list here. But there are also a couple of things we haven't talked about yet. For example, Wadsworth. So we need to add the Wadsworth expenses into this mix. And then also whatever major infrastructure projects that might be on the horizon.
It is on here, but it's number, what number was it? Number 9? Yep, number 9. We're looking at, the city's contribution is about 6 million, but we're still have a funding gap of a total of 14 million. So we're hoping to value engineer that to get it lower and hopefully get CDOT to cover a good chunk of that. But at least today we know we're still searching for 14 million.
I think to that I've got two elements that are unrelated, but the first one is relative to that question of Wadsworth, and that I think helps us explain the blending of funds that we're using across a variety of sources to leverage what we're asking the citizens to pay. So that's, I think, a critical aspect, especially as clear an example as we can provide on Wadsworth, that we're bringing in a significant amount of leveraged funds that without the citizens stepping up in that manner, we may not be able to see that kind of improvement coming into the city. So setting that aside, I think we also need to consider and understand what the viability is of a marijuana tax, specifically a city sales tax increase on marijuana, and what those funds can be used for. I do know that in previous discussions, it appeared that the marijuana, at least on the retail side, those that are in the city may consider or in other ways support some kind of sales tax specifically for that product, so that we can sort of either take care of some of the issues that are derived out of that, or at least make sure that we're seeing some kind of break even relative to the costs in that industry. Although we have gotten significant revenues from the state from that, it seems as though there may be some additional opportunity for funding. And I get that there's some sensitivity to what those funds may be used for. Some people don't want to have anything to do with those revenues, but at the same time, as we are a city, we need to consider all revenue sources. And the fact of the matter is that we are the only, or one of the only cities in Jefferson County that sell that product, and we may have an opportunity there to see some additional revenue. So we need to kind of consider that as well.
Just a question of the city. That we did not come up with the proper match on Wadsworth, would we lose that $25 million?
More than likely, yeah. I think the project wouldn't get funded, so, you couldn't fund the complete project. So, we have to show before it's fully leaded and contracted at the end that all the funds are available. So we'll have to identify, and hopefully it's less than, obviously if we get it down to 35 from 45, our match is 20% of that. So it's less than it's still 7. Why is it only 6 at 45 million?
We're being hopeful that we're going to get.
Yeah, maybe we're hoping we're going to get it down. So yeah, I think you have to verify that you have all the funds available at the end, and yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, one other thing I meant to say before, and forgive me for jumping around, but I think one of the most vital things we have to do as we approach this is have a good logical priority list. And it's going to have to be very logically need-based, not want-based.
Okay, well, I'll just throw in 2 cents, and I agree with many of the things that have been said on this as we look at this topic about how to communicate. At least that's one way of stating it. And it seems like the consensus, or at least what I've heard, is that everyone agrees that we should be very clear and specific. The comments that Zach made, I think, were repeated. And I would repeat them as well, as that I agree with that. So it seems like that's at least a general direction that we are all in, and I see head nods, and good. Okay.
Our last major topic, for this evening is the more detail on the stormwater, a stormwater fee, if we want to talk specifically about one type of fee or tax, whatever you want to call it. Scott's done a little bit more research on what other cities have done. We kind of posed some questions to you. Also, if it's something you want us to continue looking at, and maybe how we should structure it, and we can bring back information based on what you tell us tonight. So, Scott, you want to? A lot of the memo is the same of what you've seen already, but we did update it with some more specifics. So, if you want to kind of summarize what those new things are.
Right. Yeah, we did a little research here, and in your memo there's a table that lists various cities on the Front Range and what their stormwater utility fee is. They're all based on a single-family residential unit, and then other land uses, whether they're commercial, industrial, institutional, or other, are based on either acreage or a percentage of impervious surface. There's different ways to calculate that. Some can get pretty detailed and complicated, and some pretty simple. But I think most of these cities just try and keep it fairly simple for administrative purposes. And these fees, they range all over the place. They go anywhere from, say, $2 a month for a single-family home in North Glen to $14 or over in Boulder. So they're kind of all over the place, but. What I did too was pulled out a few of those to just kind of show what they do with that money. North Glen is kind of similar to Wheat Ridge in that it's a similar population, similar area, older first ring suburb with needs, and you can see that they use quite a bit of that actually for stormwater drainage improvement projects, just like we do here. Matching for grants that they get. That's another. Plus with a program like this is, when the city does go after grants or that are out there, the city always has to come up with at least a 20% match. So it helps a lot with that if we're going after urban drainage or CDOT and trying to get a good project and pony up our share. Some cities, like Lakewood, for example, quite a bit of it just goes to ongoing maintenance. Another thing to mention too is when a lot of cities started adopting a stormwater utility fee back 10, 15 years ago, there were some additional new requirements from the EPA that require addressing water quality. And so a lot of cities use their money to address that. For example, when I say water quality, there's different standards, different design practices that are required now, say for developers, when they build a project, they have to detain their water on site and provide water purity, settling of the water to get rid of contaminants. The city itself, we have to enforce stormwater regulations. Most cities have positions that didn't exist 10, 15 years ago, like a stormwater coordinator, and that person's total job is to review plans, go around the city constantly and make sure everybody is putting up their erosion control and they're not polluting, runoff into the streams and so forth. So all that said, there's just a variety of different places that cities use this stormwater utility, and you can look through the information there a little further. But again, as Patrick mentioned, we can come back and look at that further as far as if council is interested in pursuing that further as an option with Wheat Ridge, combined with some of the other funding methods that have been mentioned here tonight. We can certainly look at that a lot harder and figure out what that might look like for Wheat Ridge.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Any questions, discussion on this topic?
I think I asked this before, but who would collect this fee?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Administration of the fee would be something we would have to look at and bring back to council and propose as well. A lot of cities maybe that already have a utility system, the cities that have their own water and sewer systems, they already have a system in place. So a lot of times the stormwater fee is just lumped on with the other fee, the water sewer. In Wheat Ridge, we don't have that luxury. What we'd have to do probably is contract that out. I mean, that's one of the options we would look at.
Can I add something? But we do. I mean, when we get, in February, we get that $117 or $110, because that's what I was thinking we could always.
Wheat Ridge Sanitation?
Yeah, those sanitation, for Wheat Ridge Sanitation, there is like a one-time you pay that bill. So like I was thinking when you brought the question up is, I wonder if there's somehow you could put that on there.
Yeah, and when we looked at this several years ago, we considered different options, and we could bring it in-house, which would probably require some more staffing and maybe equipment. We could just contract with one company to do it for us. And we also considered maybe, there's more than just one sanitation district, though. There's 4 or 5. There's, 6 or 7 water districts. So, could we work with every one of them and get a system in place that they would all agree to? And, they would probably charge us, of course, some fee. But it's an option we could look at. It may not be the easiest. I think the easiest, honestly, would be just to contract it out, and a portion of the fee would have to pay for that. We could look at bringing it in-house, too, to see what the cost difference is.
So could we compare the cost of
Oh,
both?
yeah.
Could you bring that in for
Yep,
us?
definitely. We'll add that to our next list for our next meeting.
Great, thank you.
Just for grins, I have 2 questions here. I just read somewhere that we have around 13,000 households in the city there, give or take, and I don't know if that includes rental or whatever. So part of my question is, how would we collect this from rental properties? But just based on 13,600 households, if we charged them $5 a month, that'd be $816,000 a year, just to give everyone a kind of a general feel for the scope of the dollars. But how do we handle rentals? Because we are a hugely rental population.
I own rentals, and it just goes to the property owner, just like the sewer fee does. And so it'll just go to the property owner, whoever that is, and they'll have to pay it along with all their other bills. So.
And if it's a large,
Yeah, I was going to say, what about
if it's a large multifamily, it would be considered more of a business, and it would,
Right.
I would assume, wouldn't be charged what a single-family residence would be. I think it would be at some higher rate.
Right.
And it would go to the property
Based on
management.
square feet, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I do think it's interesting, and, for a lot of reasons, I think sometimes the flat fee would be easier than the impervious surface of the property, because I know we have some folks in our city that would just get nailed on that. And right or wrong, but it is what it is. But then I think it goes back to some of the other discussions of a single-family household versus, is a duplex a single-family household? And then businesses, you got some businesses, MedVed, Lutheran, that are bigger, and then you've got, B&F Tire. I could see, I'm wondering if there's a way, not only look at impervious surface, but even like the size of the lots, or, so that we could handle it a little differently, and maybe still with a flat fee, but if like you have a lot over an acre, then it's this much. If you have a lot over 5 acres, it's, kind of a flat fee, but kind of based off of the size of the property. I was kind of trying to just
Maybe that's
bring
that tiered,
things up.
kind of that tiered structure that
Yeah, because that's the other thing.
little
So
easier.
if I'm an apartment complex, I know like we have ones by us that there's like 8 units. It's like a horseshoe, and there's 8 units in there, I would think that they would pay more than, like what I would pay, but probably less than what the new town centers would pay, you know, but it's tricky, because how do you pick every property and go,
Yep.
okay, you're tier 1, you're 2 or 3, you're
Yep.
tier this, but, and then my other thing is, it just kind of seems like we're hitting people every direction. If we're looking at mills, and we're looking at sales tax, and then if we look at this fee/tax, however you look at it, I almost want to duck under the table. I'm kind of so, you know, overwhelmed. So that was my only thought of this is, you know, do we set a couple goals for a couple things, if it'd be sales tax and maybe mills, kind of see how we can get on our feet. Maybe it will free up some more money for capital improvement projects, or that's, we could do some of the storm stuff and look at this stuff later. I know we've been putting this off and off and off, but I think 3 things might be a little bit too much for our city and our citizens right now, just talking out loud.
Kind of piggybacking off of that, as you look at all these different sources of income, you look at our tax rate, we have one of the lowest tax rate. We look at our mill levy, we have the lowest mill levy in the Denver metro area, and we have no stormwater. So this is where we are, and are some of the problems we're encountering right now a result of that? And that's really something to consider. And I get your point that we're like, where do we begin? But we have to think about how we got here. And did we get here from a 1.83 mill levy, a 3% sales tax, and no increases in sales tax the last several years, and no stormwater utility? And when I look at this list of all these other cities, and they're paying on the majority less than $10 a month for the majority, only 4 came out over $10, and it's less than $20 a month. And again, these other cities have been collecting these for years, you know, really a long time. And I have to think about what we're encountering right now with deferred maintenance. Deferred maintenance in stormwater, deferred maintenance in streets, deferred maintenance in economic development. And we're sitting where we are because of what's gone in the past. And this is something that needs to be looked at pretty seriously. And which area do we want to focus on, and how we're going to move forward. But I think we're just going to hurt ourselves more if we don't do anything.
Mr. Urban and then Mr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you. I think that looking at the structure of this, I've done a little bit of research on how some other communities have devised this, and in one case they developed what they considered to be a what's it called, a equivalent residential unit, which and so that would say that the average household or average house has a certain square footage of impervial surface. We define what that is, and then we come up with a cost of the ERU at, like, let's say $2 to $3 a month or something along those lines. And then for the commercial, industrial, and sort of the, commercial, industrial, institutional usage, we could come up with a way to calculate their costs based on that ERU. And then I guess my concern is related to some of the issues around sort of the, the organizations like a cemetery or the county or the school district, defining what those sort of exempt categories may be, but also considering how can we encourage an entity that has an extensive impervial surface to improve upon their property to reduce the impervial surface, and giving them some sort of either recognition or credit or other type of acknowledgement based on the investment they made in either cleaning up the water coming off of their property, or some way to say that otherwise we would have had to capture that and do something with it, but because they spent a certain amount of money, they benefit from some way to encourage private development on their own property to reduce stormwater overall. That would be my thought. But I guess we want to do it in some way that is fair, but also considering that some of these commercial industrial uses, we may also consider how do we calculate this number and work with the property owner In some cases, that may be an aerial view that we're using to calculate these numbers. In other cases, it may be a property by property sort of going out with a tape measure to sort of either appeal or otherwise claim that my impervial surface isn't as great as you might think it is, or some sort of process that someone can come in and say, I have a dispute on that. And that's part of the administration of it we need to consider is, as we begin to collect this fee, how much of the fee is going to be going towards just the simple administration of collecting and dealing with disputes and other issues that come along with that.
I agree with Christy that having 2 or 3 different styles of tax increase just gets too complicated. And in this particular case, I think we are unfortunately trying to resolve a problem of neglect that happened in the past. That's an unfortunate truth. And we have a whole list of things we have to do. But I think no matter how important taking care of our stormwater problem is, and I'm not dismissing it in any way, shape, or form, I think it needs to be prioritized in the very same way as all the other programs. Somebody has to prioritize what is more important and what is less important. And I am against having a stormwater utility. I would rather just include it in a prioritized list. And I'm not opposed to having more than one, for example, sales tax, sunsetted sales tax for different specific items, and maybe that could be in one of those items. But, you know, logically, if you look at this, we could have a Parks and Rec utility like Arvada does. You know, there are a lot of different ways we can handle this, but we have so many different ways to cut this pie. It's unfair to look only at wastewater or stormwater when we should be prioritizing the whole gestalt of what our needs are.
I agree that we need to prioritize our needs, but I have to disagree with you that I don't feel like a sales tax, sunsetted sales tax, is the way to solve our issues with something like stormwater and sewer. Aurora's been collecting since 1969. So, you know, it's not that we're breaking the mold here to start something new. I mean, this is something that's effective for all of these other communities, and I don't think that a 5-year sales tax for our stormwater and drainage issues is the way to go. And so I would have to say that I support a fee, and I would prefer that we do, just because of all of the administrative pieces that go along with it, I would prefer that we just say residential this, commercial acre or less is this, acre to 5 acres is this, 5 acres to 10 acres is this, more than 10 acres is this. And I think that would be a more streamlined, clear-cut way where I know my commercial property is just under an acre. I know I'm paying the acre fee, and, you know, if in 5 years it gets raised, I know where I stand. Not that there is some sort of formula that we have to figure out, you know, what, you know, how much grass I have, which is, you know, not very much. But there's other places, you know, like car washes and like B&F Tire, like you said, like, you know, it is our business to have concrete, unfortunately. Like, that's part of our business. So anyway, so that's where I stand with those.
Can I respond, or you want to go ahead? Go ahead first.
I'm just curious, when we talk about a fee slash tax, I know a lot of times the fees can get passed without the vote, and I'm just curious of the overall thoughts of folks when we talk about moving forward with this, what their thought is. Would they envision this being a ballot question, or would they envision this as just, we go out, we educate, we see what people's questions are, concerns are, we have some public meetings? You know, I'm just curious if they feel that the fee, that they would envision that fee to be a ballot question, or a fee that is just, a decision of council.
It has, yeah. I think just once in my 15 years here, and it failed, obviously. I pulled up today an ordinance from, let me see where I have it. It was probably 10, how long, 10? I think it was with the trash. Probably about 9 or 10 years ago.
So was it a fee or was it a tax increase at that time? How was it? How was the
a
verbiage?
fee, but at that point, council decided to ask the voters, even though, legally, I know there's disagreement about this, but legally, council can do this through an ordinance. I know some people argue that. But you have the choice of taking it to the vote too if you want. You can put it on the ballot and ask the voters to vote for it. So it'd still be considered a fee, but council also in 2005 actually made it to second reading, a public hearing, was going to put one in place. I think it was like $84 a year per residential household, and I think commercial might have been the same, but for some reason it was tabled indefinitely 7-0 at the time, and that was in 2005. So it went to the vote at least once, and council voted on it at least once too.
So for me personally, I would want it to go to the vote of the citizens. I am uncomfortable asking for, first a storm drainage tax or fee, however you want to call it, then another tax increase for this, another one for this, and then who knows what else might be asked for coming down the pike with 38th Avenue. I don't know. But I'm really uncomfortable doing that. So if we could find a solution where it's either, a percentage or something, one question, one amount, but clearly show what it's going to be used for in the city, prioritizing that list, the needs, not the wants, but the needs. And as far as the storm drainage, I would support a flat fee for residential, flat fee for commercial. I just think it's easier to kind of figure that out than to go out there and try to have a different fee for every different type of structure. So those are my thoughts. That's where I'm coming from.
I have a question for Monica. I agree as far as the sales tax increase regarding the issues we talked about before that were on these lists and prioritizing that list and going through that. But hypothetically, let's say a stormwater fee does not pass. So say it goes to a vote and it doesn't pass. Then where will the city be in 5 years in the stormwater issue? And so that's kind of what I'm thinking of along the lines of and I do support a fee for the stormwater issue, and I support the vote for a sales tax increase. Mm-hmm. And here's why. I'm looking at this list, and we're similar to many of these cities in here in size. And I'm looking at a $2 to maybe a $9 increase per month per household to address an issue that I think everybody agrees is an issue. It's we're going to have rains here in a couple of weeks, and it's going to be an issue again. And we continue to have this deferred maintenance, and that's what I'm looking at when I look at the two issues. And if we bring it to a vote as a fee and it gets defeated, then what do we do? And so I'm just wanting you to know my thinking on this as to, personally right now I'm supporting a fee for the stormwater because it's a small amount of money per month and we can figure that out. But looking at this list, it's probably $2 to $9 a month for the stormwater, and I'm supporting that as a action by the council. And I'm supporting a sales tax ballot question with a defined list that we discussed before. And that's my thinking behind that, because I hate to think that in 5 years this issue is still going on, and at what point does it get solved? And that's kind of what I want us to consider is, at what point do we say, I understand you don't want to pay for it, but I also understand if we keep deferring it, the cost for capital improvements for our streets will keep going up, and we'll still have citizens in here saying, my street flooded, my house is flooding. And that's my thinking behind that.
Sure, and I understand your concern, but I also think that if we educate them and explain to them, look, we haven't had a storm drainage fee, here's why we need one, here's what it's going to do, here's where it's going to focus on. If we educate them and tell them, they're going to be more apt to support it. Their one frustration is that we're just asking and telling them we need it, or we're going to decide, here's what's best for you and here's why you need it. That doesn't work. That's been proven in the past. So if we are out there, we're educating them, we're explaining to them, I can't see them not voting for it, in all honesty.
But it already has been defeated
That
before,
was
and so
so
that's
long
my
ago.
concern. That's my concern.
Right, but how was that approached then?
Mr.
You
Urban?
know, I don't know.
Thank you. I think that it's totally feasible to bring this before council in an ordinance, and whether it passes or fails, I'm not sure. However, I do know, or it's in my opinion, that should that be the choice of council, we will lose out on any other revenue from the citizens, because we have sort of taken the short opportunity to pass some kind of stormwater utility fee on council without consideration of what that's going to imply to the residents when we're asking them for a sales tax increase, that, oh, by the way, we're going to take a fee regardless of what you think about it. Because we're asking for a sales tax increase, I think it's appropriate to also ask the residents regarding this fee, because it gives them that the ability to say yes or no. But if we put out a stormwater utility fee on council and approve it, it's sort of taking that short gain and not considering the larger gain we might be able to receive through some kind of sales tax increase. And because we're already asking for an increase in revenue, we might as well put it all out there and give people an opportunity to say yes or no. And you know, the question of what that outcome is and what happens after that can only be thought of after that those ballot questions are presented to the voters and they pass or they fail. But I don't think we can consider passing a stormwater utility fee while at the same time asking for additional revenues in the form of a sales tax. I just don't think the voters are going to go for that. I think they'll shoot down the sales tax. No.
Monica?
I know this is important, and I support it. I really do. And I will do my best to get out there and get that message to the voters as to why we need it. You know, we've been doing without it. So I think if we're all working together toward this, I can't see it failing. I don't want it to fail. And I feel if we go that route where we decide on council as we're asking for that sales tax increase, I really feel like it'll be defeated. I don't want to be in that situation.
Okay, well, I'll just chime in really quick. I agree with the concern about loading up the ballot, and from a number of aspects, being overwhelmed with the amount of stuff, and perhaps even struggling with the communication. I agree with Ms. Duran. You know, we can't educate if we're trying to educate on too many things. Too many disparate things, it may be difficult, actually. So I will say on the fee, the way I look at the fee, at least in terms of what I imagine it going for, is, you know, desperate needs, not even needs, and certainly not wants. These are things that are desperate needs. And so I think what's odd about it is that you are really only asking the question, do you want to pay for these desperate needs? Not, are we going to pay for these desperate needs? Because we are going to. Whether we like it or not, we are going to come around and we are going to pay for these things, because in fact they're problems and they're not getting resolved. So I think that's one consideration. There's some timing that is both ballot timing and how you put questions out, but there's also timing that is related to when you can get your feet on your ground moving forward on some of these things. I need to think about it a little bit more, but you know, maybe some of this stuff has to come in waves in order for us to you know, to communicate clearly, to be successful on all these questions. So All right, I think two more things. One, a comment, and one, a question to everyone. Just make sure that we're wrapping up. First, I just want to thank everyone because I thought this is a great conversation, actually, and very productive. And I don't. We perhaps didn't agree on every little thing. However, what I heard was, we care about communicating clearly. We care about investing in our community, or at least asking our citizenry to consider investing in our community. And it sounded like I heard multiple times that we're all willing to work together to do that. So thank you for that conversation because I think that was good. At least I think it gives us hope as we get into round two and three of this conversation that we can really drill down and be effective. So I suppose the question is to make sure that as we do go to round 2 and 3 that we incrementally are getting some of the things that you need to hear from us, direction that you need, make sure, and any requests from council as to make sure we're fleshing out the agenda in the next round. So any open questions in your mind that you want to ask?
Or maybe I'll just start out with suggestions based on what you heard and we discussed tonight. Is there anything that you would specifically like to see in a meeting round 2? More details, funnel this down to a certain area. If not, we can talk through it too. But Christy, it looks like maybe you're.
I would like to see, kind of as we discussed today, like even if this group becomes a little mini dirt task force and relooks at some of the priorities, because that could maybe help develop one of the first questions that we might be putting on the ballot. And from the sounds of it, the sooner we do that, the better. So I'd almost like to have, like at the next study session, that we have our little mini dirt task force to kind of help form that, form the priorities and discuss what we might like to put on that ballot question. That would be one of my requests, because from what I heard, it needs to be a priority, so we need to get that. So if we could have time to do that, that would be great. Is that the next study session?
That's the next one we have scheduled for this. I
Yeah.
can see if there's another date. Let's see. I have my agendas here. What's our
Yeah, I
next?
would say May.
Okay. Let's see what we can do with that.
I'd be just curious relative to the impermeable surface in the city, what percentage of that surface is owned by residents and non-residents? And looking at what the spread would be if that fee was to be assessed as to how much of that is burdened on the residents and how much of that is burdened on property owners who don't necessarily live in the city but may own property in the city?
And I was trying to interject a couple times tonight. And I have some numbers that I can just throw out real quickly, but we can talk about it in more detail at the next meeting. But the study that we had done a couple of years ago looked at that, and they broke it down: residential, commercial, multifamily, and exempt. The residential, and they backed into it to raise $2.2 million a year. It would require a $7.65 per month on a single family. And then we put together some examples of different businesses in the city. So Lutheran Hospital, as an example, would be about $3,800 a month. MedVed Autoplex would be $780 a month. First Bank on 44th and Wads would be about $268 a month. A typical gas station would be about $54 a month. And I think this one, Mike Stites was still on council. BF Tire would be $45 a month. So breaking that down, 57% of the $2 million would come from commercial. So about 1.1 million, 38% from residential, about 750,000. Multifamily, about 6%, 112,000. So
let me articulate and combine two things that I think I heard as we were going through this. Ms. Duran has already requested that we get a little bit more specificity on the administrative costs and options, and then I think we're all perhaps talking around a little bit the ideas of different options, tiered systems, and equivalent residential unit concepts or flat fee concepts, and being able to maybe look at a matrix of that. Does that sound fair? And that would give us the ability to take the next step with the stormwater utility. Anything I'm missing on that? Okay. What else? Okay. Fabulous. We'll look at the next study session agenda and try to get that squared away. I think we are at elected officials report.
Can we get our minds out of the gutter now?
I'm glad you did that at the end. Thank you very much. So, we're going to go around the table. Elected officials. Madam Clerk.
I was thinking of giving you just a little bit of historic perspective because I think some of you don't know is related to this whole discussion. When the city started, there was 2% sales tax. 1 cent went for administration and 1 cent went for capital improvements.
Actually, it's 1 cent when the city started. Then you got the second penny.
Okay. But for several decades, 2 cents was one for administration, one went for capital improvement. And I think when I started on council and Mr. Tullio started back then, that would have been about 95. We got by on that. And the Public Works, which Scott maybe doesn't even know this, I don't know if he knows how much historically, they had a 7-year rotation system of street maintenance and repair, and our roads were good. Our sidewalks were good. They would go around, and it took 7 years. Now, if there was something bad happened, they would do a special project, but even the city manager admitted, yeah, our roads are in pretty good shape, our streets. And then the sales tax came along for the increase for police and all that. And one of the problems that we started running into was the advent of computers. It was expensive. How are we going to pay for this? And so we started doing some things like we put Scott's paycheck in the CIP budget. We put computers in the CIP budget because it was infrastructure, not stuff that people walked on and drove on, but it was kind of infrastructure. It's something you had to have it to run the city. You probably start to remember that, Heather. I think you weren't here yet then.
Scott's salary's not in the CIP budget.
And
computers aren't either.
Well, and so, but on that was when we still had 2 cents. And then the 3rd cent came along, and I think did that come in 2 different?
3rd cent was in 2004 November election, and it was specific to hire 10 additional cops and to reestablish some of the staffing in the Parks Department after layoffs, and then also money for economic development for the NRS and Weavers 2020.
But somehow that we still don't have. Is 1% of our, not 1%, does 1 cent of that 3 whatever cents that we have for tax go to capital improvement projects?
Not directly. It's not directly in the capital budget. We transfer, depends on the year, $2 to $5 million from the general fund to the capital budget. But like you were saying, which is accurate, there are a lot of expenses in the general fund that take care of the capital expenses, like some of Scott's salaries. So there was a time when I first started, 1 penny went to the general fund, 1 penny went in our capital budget. But it's all 3 just comes into the city now, and it's split up to where it's needed.
And so my question is that 1 penny, that's not going to capital improvements now, the whole 1 penny, is it?
No, we budget what we need on an annual basis, and it doesn't have to. It's a general sales tax.
Oh, I know it doesn't have to.
Yeah,
but
it'd be great if it could.
But it could.
Could.
But to do that, you have to cut some other things. So I just wanted
You
to
would, yeah.
share that with you, that there was a time when capital improvements got the whole 1 penny. Where'd that go?
All right. Okay, thanks for that report. Yep.
What I wanted to mention was, I had gotten an email and several other phone calls from local business owners.
Excuse me, hold on, we got someone giving a report here, please.
I received an email and different, and numerous calls from business owners along 38th Avenue that are requesting the city staff to host a meeting with the business owners along 38th to have a discussion regarding the new plan that Create Your 38th has been voted on. They want to know expenses, cost. They'd like the meeting to be hosted by city staff, not necessarily the consultant, because the consultant had an opportunity, I think back in December, and not all of the business owners were spoken to or called upon or reached out to. So I'm here to ask if we could have that discussion, if we could set something up with the business owners along 38th, property owners, anyone who's has an investment along there, to have that discussion. Thank you.
Ms. Hoppy, any report tonight?
No, thank you.
Thank you. With respect to the Colorado Municipal League, Senate Bill 177 has passed through the Senate and is on to the House. It's been assigned to the House Veteran Military Affairs, or State Veteran and Military Affairs Committee. And so not really clear as to what's going to happen in the House, but hopefully it does pass out of the House. So we're keeping an eye on that. There's a lot of other activity. There's only 23 days left in the session. Expect a lot more to happen in the next 20 days or so, but still keep an eye on that. And then I just want to piggyback on what Councilor Duran had mentioned, and I provided a letter and an email to all of you this afternoon, and you can read that at your leisure, but I did have a copy of that here, and a couple of the requests that I've made in that letter are to echo what Monica mentioned regarding a public meeting to solicit feedback from 30th Avenue business owners, property owners, and residents. And this is specifically to take what was defined and created through the Create Your 38th process and present this to the business owners and property owners on 38th, and do speak specifically where we can relative to the timeline, the costs, the impact, even the curb and gutter cut-ins for those specific properties. And that would help me feel a little bit more comfortable with this process, because it would mirror closely what the Wazoo PL process did in meeting with business owners and talking about the impacts, and then also taking that public feedback and providing some changes to the process based on that feedback. And whether that's, I appreciate that we're doing an open house on the 27th, but in talking with some business owners, not just those business owners in what is potentially the defined project area, but also further down on 38th past Harlan, there's other businesses that may be impacted related to the construction and other issues. So that's the first request that I have, is that there be a meeting for the business owners on 38th, and it's a public meeting open to anybody who may want to attend, but it's specifically to seek feedback from those business owners and property owners alike. And then what I'd also like in sort of a concert with that is some kind of either 30-day process or way to provide the specific design materials or other documentation related to sort of the outcome of the Create Your 38th process to those business owners and property owners, to give them time to provide any additional comments they may have to this process. And then the other request I have is an assurance that there's no significant new information or circumstances that are reasonably likelihood of affecting the continued validity of the Create Your 38th process, that as we're looking at it right now, this is a feasible project and there's no additional information that may impact that. I'd also like to see that there's an assurance that this plan document has a rational basis and is based on reliable and reasonable current data and scientific methodology, including safety recommendations related to the narrowing of roadways and any impact on level of service, average daily traffic, and overall capacity of the road. I'd also like to see that the Create Your 38th planning document include an estimate of the construction timeline, the project zone, the project costs, and also including any potential funding sources for the project. And then in addition to those requests, I do have about 15 questions that are related to the stakeholder engagement process. And my questions are specifically related to the process and not considering the content of the process or the outcome of the process, but more or less how was this process effective and how did it work? Specifically because it did appear as though we had a significant number of residents participating in this process. I want to give us a chance to understand that better so that we can both learn in this instance in our decision-making process what we need to do, but also to take lessons from this process and apply it to the Wadsworth process, apply it to other projects that we may be considering, the ADA transition plan, the bike and pedestrian plan, to give us a chance to either take what's worked from this process and mirror it, or take what hasn't worked from this process and don't do it again. So I think that there's some benefits outside of this process to answering the questions that I provided, and I'm not going to go through those, but I have provided in your email a copy of this, so take a look at that. Let me know what works, what doesn't, but just from my perspective, it seems as though these requests and these questions will help us get to a better decision on what to do with 38th, and specifically related to the business owners. I think we owe it to them, seeing the lessons that have been learned on Tennyson and Broadway, helping assuage some of the concerns that business owners and property owners have, I think will go a long way to making this a successful project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Urban.
Can I take my no thank you back? Please.
Yeah, you may, please.
Thank you. Well, in relation to this, I did get an email from a business owner, and I said, that I would look into how we would be able to get that plan and meeting together. And I agree. The last time that there was a 38th Avenue design plan, there was a meeting where all of the property owners came. We came in sections. So like, if you were in this 3 blocks, you would come, and then if you were in this 3 blocks, you would come, and if you were in these 3 blocks, you would come. And that was so that we could all be able to sit at the table and have conversations about it. And out of that meeting, there were some good information that came out of it. Like when I was sitting there in my time period for Compass Construction, we were looking at like Dave's Automotive, and realized that what they had designed for the curb cut there was not big enough to be able to get a tow truck backed in through there. And so it is important to be able to look at the design, to be able to look at feasibility of, how does this work for these certain businesses? With A1, one of the issues was people parking in front of their place and going to go have dinner, and then people couldn't come and park and pick up equipment, and so like the back end parking came in that place. So it's important to have that meeting and to engage those property owners. And then as a property owner on 38th Avenue, I can just say that I received the information in the mail, the postcard in the mail to come to the meetings. I didn't participate in the meetings because of this position, but Nathan went, my husband went and participated in the first meeting anyways. And so, we did have the opportunity to, as business owners, we were invited the same way the residents were to come and be a part of that meeting. So, but I do think it's important for us to be able to have this open house, so.
Thank you. Mr. Matthews?
I just wanted to mention here, and I just take it for what it is, it's just a mention. I don't know if everyone's aware of it, but when I was still giving my snippets, I talked about the city of Littleton and their 300 type vote that they'd had. Well, I see out of the paper here recently that the Littleton City Council is considering whether to dismantle their URA, and just find it interesting that they've progressed to the next step after forcing the city to vote on all TIF issues. And it'd be interesting to follow that story and see how it ripples through the rest of the communities.
Mr. Fitzgerald?
Earlier in this meeting, at the very beginning, a citizen stood up and asked council to meet with citizens, and so District 3 aims to please. So we are going to have a meeting on May 21st at 9 o'clock at the Rec Center. And also, I would like to mention that there is a survey on the city website for accessory dwelling units. I invite people to go to the website and take the survey.
Ms. Davis.
That didn't sound very excited. So, backed by popular demand and requested by a citizen this evening, everyone in District 2 should have gotten postcards for Catch Up with Christie. My neighbor kidded around to say I should have a barbecue and have it be Catch Up with Christie, but that was good. But anyways, the first one is May 5th, and it will be at Clancy's, and then the next one is August 27th, and that will be at Infinity Pie, and the next one after that is November 15th. And that will be back at Clancy's. I've tried to break them up. One's a Tuesday night, one's a Thursday night, one's a Saturday kind of morning, so that hopefully it meets everybody's schedule. So that's backed by popular demand, and I'm sure I'll have a lot of things to talk about, especially based off of what we talked about tonight. Also, an update on urban renewal. And some projects that we are working on. We haven't had a meeting since I think the last couple times that I've reported, but just some general numbers that I posted on social media is that the Kipling Ridge project is a little over budget as far as tax revenues. We're not by law allowed to say who had what taxes, but they're over the budget revenues, so basically the TIF is being paid back quicker. And that's even with one pad not being rented. So that projected budget we had was that third like retail pad would have been rented, otherwise known as, I know at one point discussions about Taco Bueno or someplace like that. But that was assuming that all of those pads would be taken. So with one of them still up for lease, we are ahead of schedule as far as TIF and repayment. So the good news on that. Also, a reminder that there are TIF funds that are going to be available. For those folks who don't know, there are funds that go back to the community, and they can only be spent on public improvements in that urban renewal zone. So there are some funds available, $150,000 to go towards the 38th Avenue corridor that could go towards public improvements. Again, that could be anything from parking garages to benches to sidewalks to whatever. Whatever is projected. Again, I think at one of the last meetings I talked about, we did have a session to kind of talk about how those funds can be spent. In perspective, I think, and this is just kind of a guess, Arvada has $9 million to spend on their TIF on public improvements in their property. So just a little perspective there. But hey, it's money that can go towards our public improvements, which is a good thing. I'd like that $9 million, but and so would some of these drainage issues and stuff. But that's just kind of an update on urban renewal. But there hasn't been a meeting as of to date. I don't have a scheduled one in May, to the best of my knowledge. But so that's something going on with urban renewal. And then lastly, there, the second phase of Town Center North is having their grand opening soon. I think they did have move-in, didn't they, Patrick? Yeah. So folks are moved in. For the folks listening in TV land that I promised, there'll be a street light on 44th. That's coming soon. And again, urban renewal types of funds that are paying for that, public improvement and a street light. So that's good news there too. And that's all.
Thank you. Ms. Wood.
Okay, I have a few things here. First of all, I just want to remind everybody that on May 7th is the 44th Avenue Cruise, and the majority of the events are going to take place at Anderson Park. The cruise takes place from about 8 to 3. It is a poker run, so people that have hot rods and these cruises, you can sign up to do the poker run, which hits businesses all along from Ward Road all the way back to Harlan and Cypher Automotive down there. The city is a sponsor, Cipher Automotive, several businesses are sponsors of this. So we're hoping for really good weather, not like this past weekend, and that we'll have a really successful cruise on May 7th. The second thing I wanted to say is about the school. This past Saturday, I got to hear astronaut Joe Tanner. It was a really interesting talk. He had selfies from when he was in space, and he was fixing the space station, so it was a really interesting talk. The students did make the picnic tables for the Carnation Festival. That's the project that we're working with the schools. Each school is going to get a picnic table. They're going to get to paint it, and they'll be displayed in front of the Carnation Festival. And I'd like to say thank you to Jordan Lumber out on Ward Road, who donated the lumber for this project. So thank you to them. So a lot of really interesting, great things happening at the high school. And actually on tomorrow or Wednesday, the kids leave with their cars for the Eco Marathon in Detroit, and they'll be racing their 2 cars for that. So that was happening at the high school this weekend. And then another thing I'd like to bring up, and it's more for something for us to think about for a future study session or a discussion after one of our meetings. But it's rules of engagement of, and I don't know if that's the exact term, but rules of engagement of council members in different arenas in the public. And 2 areas I had a question on is a public meeting where we're asking for citizen input. How should we as council members conduct ourselves? And I know in some cities you can't even attend public input meetings, so some cities don't even want you to go. And I think in other cities there's guidelines as to how we should act. And the other one would be on social media. And I don't have an answer as to how we should act, and that's why I'm asking us to think about it, and that maybe we could come together and have a discussion. And social media is so new that how do we define when we're a council person and when we're a citizen, and when do we cross over those, and what are some guidelines that maybe we could agree on as a group for these different meetings? And even like the Create Your 38 meetings, we all went to that, but we kind of stood in the back. But how maybe some general rules of engagement that we can agree upon as a group for how we should interact with citizens in different arenas. And I know we had talked about this during council rules, that when a citizen group invited us to one of their meetings, in that instance, are we acting as council members? Are we acting as citizens? And where this crossover is. And I think there's a lot of gray lines there. But I think we might all benefit from some general guidelines that we might be able to agree upon. So I'm asking for that to probably be on maybe a study session, or maybe the next time we talk about council rules or something like that.
A question, yes, please.
Are we participating in the grand opening of the Gold Line with RTD? Do we have any plans for that as a city?
We are, and it's going to be exciting, especially given that the A-Line's opening this week. RTD is going to give us a date in July, and we have funding budgeted. I want to say we budgeted $20,000. There's 2 parts to it. There's the Friday grand opening ceremony for dignitaries, and free rides are on Saturday. So there's 2 pieces that we originally participate in. Because we're end of the line, we're going to be hosting the grand opening ceremony on Friday. And then on Saturday, we'll host some type of community event along with the other stations on the line. Typically, we come up with a universal theme that hasn't been identified yet, but Maureen and Carly are both really involved in that planning, and that's going to start picking up some momentum as they wrap up the A-Line and then move on to the Gold Line opening. So we'll have more information for you towards the end of the summer, but there'll be a big splash, big hit for our community. I don't have a specific date. RTD will let us know.
They'll let us know in July when it's going to be, probably in October or November. Yes. It's not going to open. Yeah, it doesn't open till the fall, but they'll know in July when that date will be.
Okay, I'll just throw in that I know I lost a couple of big branches actually, and the city has opened up a tree branch drop-off site. It is at the Parks Forestry Open Space Division building at 44th and Field. There's a wonderful map with directions about how to drive in and drop off and get out of there on the website. And I know I had some people calling from District 3 in our last storm, and I think hopefully they'll be happy that we have this right now. So if anyone's out there who wants to go figure it out, go to 44th and Field or go to the website, and then go to 44th and Field.
Just a heads up on that, this isn't a budgeted item. So it depends on how extensive it gets. We may have to come back to you and ask for some funds to help cover this cost, but we thought it was important. There was a pretty heavy storm and a lot of branches down, so hopefully it's not too expensive if we can cover it with our budget. If not, we'll let you know.
So you're saying hurry up and get your branches.
Hurry, get your branches up.
All right, meeting adjourned.